The following is rated not safe for work. It contains strong language, adult situations, and lots of spoilers. Discretion is advised.
In the criminal justice system, cinematic-based offenses are considered especially heinous. The dedicated attorneys who investigate these villainous films are members of an elite squad known as the Reels of Justice. These are their stories.
Order, please, order. The Reels of Justice is now in session. Judge Dylan D. Defense presiding. Will you all rise for the Honorable Dylan D. Defense?
Thank you. All eyes on me, and be seated. Welcome to the Reels of Justice. I would first like to welcome friend of the court, Kevin Caliber, and thank him for joining our jury.
It's an honor and a duty.
Today, we are hearing the case of The People versus Final Fantasy, The Spirits Within. This 2001 CGI animated feature, named for the popular video game franchise, showcased cutting-edge graphics technology to tell the story of a world plagued by extraterrestrial specters and the tribulations of a group of heroes seeking to return balance to the Earth. For those unfamiliar with our court proceedings, we are here to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. As always, in this courtroom, films are to be considered excellent until proven awful, and the burden of proof lies upon the prosecution to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this film is guilty. Keep it simple and clean, prepare your potions, and hit that last save point. This trial is about to begin. Mr. Maynard, you have been summoned for the prosecution. You may begin your opening statement.
Oh, it's been a while since I've gotten to fry a turkey, but I'm ready.
Hey, that's my line.
Order, please, order. Mr. Maynard, your opening statement.
Humans and extraterrestrial apparitions of the jury, what we're dealing with here today is not a film. What we're dealing with here today is an extended video game cutscene. One that never rewards you with the satisfaction of any actual gameplay. One that never lets you press X to skip. One that simply traps you in a seemingly never-ending artificial interstitial that blathers on and on for 2 full hours and then finally, mercifully, cuts to some end credits. Now I ask you, good peoples and shadow-shrouded specters of the jury, does that sound like a video game you'd want to play? Thank you.
Very well. Mr. Haslar, I believe you have been summoned for the defense. You may cast your opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. Kupo, jurors. I am Reels of Justice lawyer and Final Fantasy fanatic Ben Haslar, and today I hope to sell you on the merits of Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within. No, I'm not going to try and convince you that everything Squaresoft has done is a masterpiece, but I hope you'll hear me out and give this film a chance. Every so often, there comes a film that raises the bar in some way. For example, however you may feel about the story of Avatar, it certainly wasn't impressive in what it did for 3D films. So much so that the trend came roaring back for the next couple years. Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was the first full-length cell animated film. And Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within is the first full-length photorealistic animated film. All of these films required a Herculean effort by all those involved to get the film from script to screen while doing something entirely new. And it's gorgeous to look at. You'll be hard-pressed to find anyone who disagrees on that front. Square followed the photorealistic approach with Final Fantasy VII Advent Children, similarly beautiful to behold, to such a degree that just this year, Final Fantasy VII Remake aspired to do in real time what these films did in rendered animation just 20 years before. The Spirits Within follows some of the same formulas that made the game so popular. It's a mesh of past and future, fantasy and science fiction. You'll see such familiar elements like Gaia in the live stream. You'll see a continuation of having a character named Sid appear, and you'll have a romance in space similar to that of Squall and Renoa's. You should also take note of the A-list cast on display here, featuring the voice acting talents of Ming-Na Wen, Steve Buscemi, Ving Rhames, Alec Baldwin, and Donald Sutherland. I mean, Donald Sutherland. This man can't be bad in anything he's in. It's just impossible. Perhaps it can be said that Final Fantasy creator Hironobu Sakaguchi flew too close to the sun on a one-winged angel with this film's monumental budget. But the film undoubtedly has a legacy. It's an incredible technological accomplishment, and I invite you, jury members, to get us swept along for the ride. Thank you.
Thank you both. You have both been awarded 500 experience for your opening remarks.
Woo.
Mr. Maynard, you may now begin your case.
Thank you, Your Honor. The first thing I'd like to address about this film is the truly atrocious acting that happens throughout. And I'm not speaking about the actual voice acting itself, which isn't all that bad. I'd say it's serviceable. But about the incredibly emotionless expressions on the faces of nearly all the CGI characters during the course. Now, I'd say that the digital artist took a bit more time with the protagonist character, Dr. Aki Ross, because it seems she is at least able to express up to 7 emotions throughout the entire film, from fear to shock to surprise and even alarm. But in the case of every other character in the film, they're restricted to only about 1 or 2 emotional expressions each. Listen, I understand that at this point, the technology was sorta new, but if your visual medium restricts your character's facial expressions to a more limited range than traditional cell animation was capable of 70 or 80 years prior, then perhaps the technology is not quite ready to carry the burden of telling a full-length feature story. And of course, as far as technology being new, let me remind you that the first Toy Story came out in 1995, 6 years prior. And while those characters don't have the widest range of facial expression imaginable, they certainly show a lot more emotional range than the characters in this film. Also, they had the added benefit of actually being plastic and wooden toys, whereas the characters in this film are supposed to be flesh and blood human beings, capable of a wide array of expressions. Instead, the characters in The Spirits Within end up appearing more artificial than any of the toys in the Pixar classic. This is unfortunate because it winds up making a complete waste out of a truly phenomenal cast of actors they ensembled to voice the thing. My friend here already listed almost everybody, but of course he forgot James Woods and he forgot Sir Keith David. Now, on paper, that's a hell of an impressive ensemble. Unfortunately, despite some rather spirited performances that actually try to carry a good deal of emotion through speech, the clunky CGI models are unable to keep up with that expression and end up actually detracting and ultimately subverting some of the few moments of the film that had emotional potential. For instance, let's examine the comically one-dimensional villain of General Hein, voiced by James Woods, who is only able to display a singular expression on his face throughout the entire film, a scolding sneer worn perpetually to drive home the fact he's a villain.
I'm going to object to that. There's a few times that he does show different emotions that I can think of just off of the top of my head. Like one where they're saying, "Oh, there's phantoms loose in the facility," and he's like, "Well, of course you detect phantoms." It's a very sarcastic eye roll.
He rolls his eyes, but his mouth mostly still stays the same sneer and scowl.
And the other one I would like to disagree with is like where he yells at the warning, like I do to my smoke alarm when it's going off, like, "Just shut up, I know."
I do like that moment, and his voice acting certainly carries it, but his face, I would challenge that his face changes very much. His face might make one slight change before the actual explosion when he realizes he's dying, but when he is shouting at the machine, it does seem like he's still kind of stuck in that perpetual sneer. Let's bring up another moment. The scene where Hein intentionally lowers the protective barriers of the city in one sector. There's a protective barrier around the whole city, Your Honor, that keeps the ghosts from coming into the city. And General Hein intentionally lowers it so that the ghosts will intentionally come into the city, which will give him good reason to want to tactically strike back against the phantoms. So he's sort of in some way a fucked up futuristic version of Walter Peck. So he intentionally comes and lowers the barriers in the city, which accidentally allows an entire horde of phantoms to enter the city. The voice actor gasps, "What have I done?" But the CGI counterpart continues to scowl disapprovingly throughout the delivery. Let's look at the romantic relationship between Ming-Na, her character Aki, and Alec Baldwin's character, Gray Edwards. And you would never know there's a romantic connection between them just by looking at them. because no real emotional connection is ever felt by the audience. The small, subtle nuances, the imperceptible mannerisms that are in any given performance of merit, things an actor does that are more often felt rather than seen, are completely stripped away in this film due to the use of CGI technology. Another scene, Vin Raines, who voices the character Ryan, is injured during an escape, and despite being able to hear the pain in Rames' voice as he utters, "Ouch," and "No drugs, just give me a gun," the CGI rendering is unable to match that pain in its face, so we just see the character close its eyes and sort of lull its head to the side. You're unable to relate to the character's pain. It's almost comical how much the pain in his voice doesn't match the lack of pain on the CGI character's face. And if the voice actor weren't groaning, you wouldn't be sure if he was in pain, or maybe he's just tired, maybe suffering from a spell of vertigo.
Maybe having the thing impaled in his chest might be some sort of clue.
But you only know because the movie told you. Similar to the relationship, you only know they have a prior relationship because the movie informs you. You can't pick it up from small little clues in the performance, subtle gestures or small twitches in the face that are important to any decent kind of performance. Things which even cell animation can capture. You mentioned a Herculean effort earlier, and you look at Hercules, the Disney animated film, I think that's 97, which also features James Woods' voice, and his character's portrayal of Hades has a wide range of emotion, from anger and rage to that kind of same sarcastic eye roll emotion, but the face goes with it the whole time. He's not stuck in one.
Yeah, but animation was like on its way out at that point. It's a mastered art form, while this is brand new.
Well, we have animation right now. What are you talking about? It's not gone anywhere.
Well, the Disney animation, they've switched more to the Pixar CGI way of going, things like Frozen.
And none of them are as good.
So your point is well taken, Mr. Prosecutor. I think what you're trying to say is that the technology that the CGI had at the time was not doing a good job conveying these facial expressions. Defense, did you want to rebut that point anymore?
Well, I agree to an extent. I do think it was sort of a new art form, and these people, the characters that he's describing, they're mostly scientists and military, which aren't really known for their, huge emoting ability.
Could you give us a bit of a rundown on some of these characters? I mean, we've obviously established that the general is the bad guy, but could you?
Yeah, I was thinking more of Gray, like the captain that looks sort of like Ben Affleck. And Ben Affleck, I don't know what voice range or what range of emotion his face has, but I think this guy was modeled after him.
And Ben Affleck's face with like Alec Baldwin's voice coming out is very, very upsetting. They don't match at all.
To an extent, although I do think there's great moments where they do emote, like I mentioned with Hines shouting at the alarm, and I think Steve
that's
Buscemi,
a funny line.
Getting shocked by electricity and things like that, he shows visual surprise. But what I would like to acknowledge what my esteemed colleague over there has pointed out is the voice talent is on point. So even if there's a little bit of uncanny valley going on with the presentation of the faces, and it's not quite there as far as its mastery of getting the subtle nuances, you have to at least give me that the voice acting is great, and that alone is a point in favor for this movie not being bad.
I'm glad you brought up the term uncanny valley, because it's exactly what I wanted to bring up next. And for the court's edification, the phenomenon uncanny valley is basically the theory that the more a humanoid object imperfectly resembles actual human beings, the more it will provoke a feeling of eeriness or even revulsion in observers. And one of the parallels I kept thinking about when I was watching this film is to the three-dimensional CGI pornographic films that people like Ben are so fond of watching on the internet.
That's never been proven, sir.
The photorealistic bodies look like humans. They have human-like features like boobies and dingalings. Sure, their eyes move and their mouths open and close, but never do their faces entirely match the ecstasy of the moans and screams that are poorly synced up to their movements. Sure, they look a bit like people, but they aren't. And so that always kind of removes you from forming any kind of attachment or attraction to them as you would a real-life human being. We were doing a rundown of characters earlier. You've got Donald Sutherland's character. I agree. Some really great voice acting. But because the face I'm watching on screen is almost sleeping his way through the scenes, it's so startlingly jarring, the contrast between Sutherland's energetic line reads, which clash starkly with this kind of constantly patient and almost bored expression on the simulacrum's face. There's a moment where he's sending two people. He's sending Gray and Aki basically to their potential deaths in the Phantom Crater in the climax of the movie. But you wouldn't know he was doing that because, judging by the look on his face, he might as well be ordering the Blue Plate special at his local Cracker Barrel.
Well, you're not going to go, unfortunately, from 0 to 60 with this new technology, but considering that we are going from 0, we at least went from 0 to 45. It's very impressive what they managed to do for the first effort for photorealism animation. You've got such beautiful like skin defects, like little spots and discolorations on their skin,
I would say that a lot of that is on Aki's face when you have close-ups, and I agree, you can sort of see the porousness of her skin, but the whole time I just kept thinking, poor us, the audience, that we have to sit there and watch her lack a facial expression this whole time. Her hair was lovely, though. Her hair, I will agree, her hair moved very well.
Oh, and I think Dr. Sid is animated very well as well.
Not his expressions to when he speaks. I mean, those were some of the moments
I'm just talking about just the model itself. Like the model itself is...
He looks like an old man.
Yeah.
Stipulated. He looks like an old man.
And there are a few that maybe don't look quite as like they had quite as much polygon count as the 100,000 that Aki Ross had, but they do all have little spots and creases, and everything here is intentional. Like there's veins on Aki Ross's hands, for God's sakes. I mean, that's just a level of detail that most people would just think, it looks close enough. Let's just leave it as it is.
Well, no, they definitely spent a lot more time, Your Honor, focusing on Aki. That is something I said earlier, because I think they knew she was going to be a sort of breakout character. It's entirely possible that she even kicked off this significant level of interest in three-dimensional pornography that I mentioned, because, of course, she was famously featured on the cover of Maxim that year, decked out in a bikini, which, by the way, is completely impractical for any scientific endeavor. However, she was... She's voted one of the sexiest.
On the side, she's not doing that on the space station.
Well, okay, but I don't know where the scientists need to come and do a bikini shoot. And by the way, she was voted one of the sexiest women of 2001 by Maxim and its readers, ranking 87 out of 100.
I agree with all of this. This is all great.
I think it's strange that you're essentially voting a pile of pixels over a real flesh and blood woman who has to work to look good, right? An artist
I'll go one
created
further.
this
I like
woman
that she's beautiful, but she's not
good.
A supermodel. Like this.
I agree, and she doesn't belong on the cover of Maxim. And I don't mind CGI blended into my movies to add certain effects, but when the whole thing CGI. To me, it really CGI already. When I can see CGI, it takes me out of film. Like I'm a practical effects lover. So a movie that's entirely CGI in this way, where I can't even tell the stop motion guy underneath anymore. Like I can live with a Sin City, but when I can't even see the where the actor was anymore, and that's where the facial expressions really harmed to me. Like they didn't seem to have any motion capture person under there to move their mouths and really emote, to sync up with anything. It's just nothing but a pile of pixels moving, and I have a hard time relating and attaching myself to that. And I think it's funny that there's a genuine fear around the time of the release of this film that these CGI renderings would replace real human actors. And I think all those fears were allayed once the film was released, because the emotionless, vacuous expressions of most of the characters would make a high school drama auditioner look like Sir Laurence Olivier.
All right, Mr. Maynard,
in closing on the topic of the CGI performances in this film and how they undermine the entirety of the project on the whole, because how can one be compelled by a story filled with characters we care nothing about? I like to quote from another movie that used CGI graphics, one which still holds up a hell of a lot better than the graphics in this film, 1993's Jurassic Park. The creators of this film were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. Dr. Ian Malcolm.
Mr. Haslar, would you like any kind of rebuttal to this emotion point, or can we let Mr. Maynard move on to his next argument?
I agree with the emotion point, but the thing that I like about this is it was like the first one, and they did it so monumentally well for a first step that they were able to continue in Final Fantasy VII Advent Children and Final Fantasy XV Kingsglaive. They're getting darn close, and even in Final Fantasy VII Remake, they're able to like get this sort of thing almost down pat now. So yes, it was a first step, but it was by no means a bad one. It's not like they tried something completely experimental and just failed off the get-go. There's just so much to be impressed by with the detail that they put into it.
Okay, I think the jury is going to have a lot of meat to chew on for this idea of the emotions that the CGI actors were expressing or not expressing, as the case may be. Mr. Maynard, if you'd like to proceed with your next line of argumentation.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to the really boring plot of this movie. Now, if this film is about anything besides the filmmaker showing off some of their newest toys in the field of computer animation, one might say it's about a group of scientists and space marines who must combat an army of alien ghosts that arrive on Earth. Heck,
that
on
sounds
paper,
pretty cool, Mr. Maynard.
Doesn't actually sound all that bad at all, right? It almost sounds fun, doesn't it? But sadly, in execution, what this film is really about is a group of scientists and space marines who stand around talking about combating an army of alien ghosts that arrive on Earth.
Oh, that's not fun at all.
There's probably only really 10 solid minutes in this nearly 2-hour video game cutscene that actually feature any real fighting. The rest of the time is filled with moral dissertations on the existence of spirits and tiresome explanations of vacuous pseudoscience.
Challenge, Mr. Prosecutor, does...
Vacuous pseudoscience that the film is cautious about going too deep into because it knows just how little it holds any water.
We love philosophical discussions here on Reels of Justice. Are you saying that makes it a bad movie to not have action and to instead be talking about what these things could possibly be?
We do like philosophy here.
I do like philosophy and breaking down things, but when you know just right of that on the camera, there's some sweet-ass alien ghosts that need to get shot up. Like, show me the alien ghosts getting shot up. Like, you discuss philosophy while you do it.
Shut up. There's several.
You only get 10 minutes of it, if that.
Like the opening scene alone is 10 minutes.
The opening scene, she's mainly running from ghosts. I mean, maybe they shoot them for 2 minutes. They might kill a couple of ghosts.
There's fear there. There's atmosphere. You know, I
never felt fear with her. I don't want to go back down the CGI blank face, but I never felt much fear for her.
All right, order, please, order. Let's stay focused on the plot. Mr. Maynard, you were getting off on a pretty good tangent there. If you'd like to continue.
Well, the plot, Your Honor, if you want to call it that, which was, by the way, nominated for Worst Screenplay in the 2001 Stinker Awards.
Oh, they don't know anything.
But they lost out to Pearl Harbor, unfortunately. So this movie's not even excellent at being bad. Mostly revolves around a series of fetch quests in which the main characters leave the safety of the barrier city to gather a 6th, 7th, and finally 8th spirit, which, when properly combined using the aforementioned vague pseudoscience, will be able to negate the naughty ghosts. Now, don't worry about how that works, the movie says. Just look at the pretty pictures. Now, there's an alternate plan to eliminate the phantoms, which is called the Zeus Cannon, a giant ghost-killing GoldenEye laser beam fired from an orbiting space station. But the scientists warn that the laser could incidentally also wind up harming the spirit of the Earth, Gaia, and are insistent they should be able to enact their silly plan with the 8 spirits, which solely for the sake of the movie story, the authorities acquiesce to. The bewildering story meanders on and on, leaving us, the audience, with a host of unanswered questions, which the film never feels obligated to satisfy. Are these alien ghosts...
were not answered?
I'm about to get into that. Thank you, Counselor.
Right.
Are these alien ghosts only capable of being harmed by specially designed weapons? Or are they also...
they're specially harmed by spirit energy weapons that Dr. Sid was able to create.
Or are they also harmed occasionally by explosions?
That have the same sort of spiritual.
The film seems to show both.
Yeah,
I remember some vague explosions out there in the desert.
Everything. It's in the Ovapacks, it's in the weapons, and it's in their shield barriers. So all of that are things that interact with the phantoms.
Okay, now if we have the technology to build barriers that contain them, why are these barriers not standard on every single ship that leaves the safety of the city
Because
barrier?
there's only so much spirit energy a person can harness.
So there's a limit. But we can surround an entire city in these barriers, but we can't just get one for a few drop ships that need to move out.
Mr. Haslar, is it established in the film at some point that there is a limited amount of spirit energy, or are you guessing?
Well, I'm just assuming so because there's only so many people. There's only so many living things alive on this planet. You venture out, and the whole place is a wasteland. So if
I don't even remember the film explaining that the barriers were powered by human spirits.
No, it absolutely does. Aki and Dr. Sid are talking about that before, that first trial.
Do you have that quote?
They are talking about it being powered by spirit energy, I'll grant you, but you made a claim that there were limitations on it, and the counselor for the prosecution does have a point. We do see at the end of the movie the Range Rover that they're taking into the meteor does have a spirit barrier around it. So I think it is a relevant question. Why don't the rest of the airships have those spirit barriers, at least around the cockpits?
Yeah, at least the cockpit.
I think that's a very fair question, and you did claim that there was a limited amount of spirit energy. And I just want to establish if that was actually said in the movie or if we're speculating.
Said in the movie. I think that's just like back story that they probably did because the whole planet is virtually a wasteland, except for when something's protected and they're able to live inside of a barrier.
Now, since my esteemed colleague seems to have all this background knowledge that wasn't in the film, can you tell me, is there a barrier that runs underneath the city as well to prevent the Phantoms from coming up through the ground like we see they're capable of doing?
I don't know.
Okay. Now, I've got more. Why did we decide to build a multi-billion-dollar space station with a Phantom eradicating laser beam if we weren't all positively on the same page that it should be used?
It was using for other purposes as well, like Aki Ross does her experiments in 0G up there.
Okay. With the cannon? The cannon's part of
the cannon's not necessary, but the military's like, hey, we got a space station.
Cannon seems like an expensive part of it. It's basically a Death Star.
You don't think the military's like, we got a space station, we should have a cannon up there? I mean, come on.
Okay, well now, why do some people, like General Hein, doubt the existence of the Earth spirit Gaia when the entire planet is literally being besieged by similar phantoms?
They don't know that they're phantoms. That's a revelation that comes to the party.
They know they're phantoms. They call them their phantoms. They don't know they're
ghosts.
They
call them phantoms because they're invisible, but they don't know that they're the ghosts from another planet. That's something that Aki Ross realizes in her journey.
Which is the stupidest revelation to me. Halfway during the movie, they're like, oh, these spirits, these phantoms are actually ghosts. Well, no fucking duh. What did you think they were?
Invisible aliens, invisible creatures that you can't see. That's terrifying because the only way to fight them is to illuminate them.
Yeah, they had some weird illumination gun that you can kind of temporarily see them, and there's some weird pseudoscience explanation for why they can be seen halfway through it. Now, why did they fire weapons blatantly inside of a moving aircraft?
Which scene are you referring to?
When Aki is passed out and losing consciousness, and the two military guards hold guns on Gray and telling him not to move, like they're going to put her under arrest. They fire several times within the aircraft, and bullets seem to just go stray.
Well, it's not quite an aircraft like you're thinking, like a plane that's pressurized up in the air. That's where it's dangerous, when the plane is pressurized. This is more like a helicopter that's sort of flying low to the ground.
Okay. I might accept that. I feel like they could probably get higher in that thing, but there's no telling. Now, why do we tell characters who are surrounded by phantoms to hurry and get inside the ship when we've established that the phantoms can easily pass through the walls of the ship and it therefore offers no protection?
Aren't they were planning to fly away, weren't they? I mean, the ship gives them an opportunity to escape. It's not to protect them.
You're just as vulnerable inside the ship as you're outside of it.
Except
no, they can't get inside the ship. Incorrect. He told them to get inside the ship before the ship was decoupled. They were trying to decouple it, and he tells them to get inside the ship before they're decoupled. They can't take off yet.
I assume that they know they're going to take it. They're not going to run up the hills. I mean, the phantoms are definitely going to get them up the hill. Your best shot is to get into a vehicle of some kind and increase your speed.
Anyway, these are quite a lot of questions that I've asked here
that I've answered.
Not all of them, actually. You I would say
I don't know about
maybe a third of them. You probably answered maybe a third of them. Anyway, back to the plot, if you can call it that, of this film. About halfway through the movie, both Steve Buscemi and Vin Rain's characters are killed off. presumably because they both got tired of being in such a stupid movie. Alec Baldwin's character is later quoted as saying, Alec Baldwin's character is later...
We don't know why they were killed off so early.
Alec Baldwin's character is later quoted as saying, I want to believe they're in a better place. Well, Alec, rest assured, they are in a better place. They're out of this movie. Moments later, Alec Baldwin's character himself tries to pull a sacrifice play so that he too can die and escape the movie. But Ming-Na's character refuses to leave him to die for fear of being trapped alone in the film forever with the sneering James Woods and a doped up Donald Sutherland. And what's funny about that is less than 5 minutes after trying to sacrifice his own life, Baldwin's character does a complete 180 and refuses to engage in what he considers to be a suicide mission in the Phantom Crater. Why? Because suicide was cool like 5 minutes ago, Alec. Why aren't you willing to die now?
Because it's all spirit energy, and he doesn't believe in that sort of thing at that moment.
He doesn't believe in spirit energy. It powers his guns, you just told me. It powers all the barriers, told me.
Not like the human spirit. Like, he knows like the energy comes from like the human body or like a living plant or something like that. But
that's why I don't get it. These people fight what they essentially are ghosts, and they have trouble believing in planet spirits. They have trouble believing in human spirits. They apparently have trouble believing in afterlives. Why? They have all the proof at their fingertips that they would ever need that these things exist.
While watching this film, I was kind of reminded that the coronavirus, where like people have all the proof that that a mask might stop harmful breathing. They have all the proof they need, and yet they still refuse to believe it. It's just human nature.
So humans are stupid. That's what you're saying. Well, I guess that's an easy way to explain everything. Now, since I'm a stupid human too, I'd like to explain what happens in the thrilling climax of this film. I'd like to, but I'm incapable because I have no fucking idea what happens in the climax of this film. So I'd like to pass it off. I'd like to pass it off to my dear colleague, Big Ben, who will now explain to all of us exactly what happens in the ending of this fucking movie.
Well, now hold on a minute, Big Ben. You don't actually have to take this bait from the prosecution if you want. If the prosecution wants to rest his case, that's fine.
No, I don't want to rest my case. I want Ben to tell me what happened at the end of the movie because I don't understand it.
He is not on trial here. If you want to make a point about the end of the movie, Mr. Maynard, you are more than welcome to do it. If Mr. Big Ben would like to make a point about the end of the movie, he is more than welcome to do it. But he is not obligated to do it because you asked.
I agree. He is not obligated, Your Honor. If he's unable to explain the ending of the film either, then I'll totally accept that.
What ending are you referring to? Are you referring to like where Gray uses his spirit energy as a conduit between the 8 spirits that Aki Ross has and the Phantom Spirit?
That is part of it, and then slightly the step before that where they actually manage to encounter the 8th and final spirit. What's everything that happens after that?
So the 8th and final spirit is a phantom that touched Earth spirit energy and sort of adjusted its frequency and became a spirit. It happened twice. It was they detected one phantom spirit from above. It got destroyed, and another phantom spirit had the same thing happen to it. And this phantom spirit is the one that Aki Ross came in contact with and gave her like the final revelation. And then with all
at that point, we can see all the spirits. Why couldn't the movie show me a spirit touching Gaia and then touching Aki? I never saw that in the movie.
All 8 spirits within her, within that chest plate of hers. So with the phantom
spirits within
above, yes, exactly. Gray is used as a conduit to get that spirit frequency through him into the phantom spirit frequency, which cancels each other out.
Real quick, could either one of you could do this? Can we explain for the court's edification the 8 spirits? That's kind of the conceit of the movie here. Like,
sure.
Sleepy, dopey, bashful, grumpy.
You are on thin ice. You are on thin ice, Mr. Maynard. And though I do like it, I think it's very funny. But please, why don't we let Big Ben handle explaining this conceit for us?
So the idea is everything these spirits have a frequency. So it's sort of a mesh of fantasy and science fiction, which is what Final Fantasy as a whole thrives on. With all these spirit energy frequencies together, what they need to find is another frequency that can counteract that, which is, another it's a principle in science that you got like sine and cosine. You can like cancel things out with different waveforms. So by gathering different spirits that can combine together into a specific waveform that's the exact anti signature of the phantom signature, you can cancel both of them out and then nullify the threat.
Thank you, Big Ben.
Hey, I found it fascinating.
Since,
What?
Mr. Maynard, please wake up.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Is there anything else you would like to say in regards to your line of criticism of the plot of the movie, or would you like to move on to another argument?
I think that is my criticism of what could be conceived as a plot.
Very well.
Part, which
you get
was
200 experience in mithril armor.
Baffling and hardly explained. I mean, what Ben just explained is not in the movie.
It is in the movie.
It's not laid out in any sort of graspable terms in the movie. They do a picture where they're like, okay, good ghosts make a white wave and it counters out naughty ghosts. And that's like it, basically. Like, they should have just explained good counters out bad, and that I would have bought. Anyway, I don't want to harp on this next point too long, but it's probably the most famous critique of this film.
Okay.
Is that it absolutely has nothing to do with the video game franchise Final Fantasy.
Gasp.
I know. I don't want to harp on. I'm sure Ben has a few small things like, Dr. Sid is in this too, and there's
The spirit is much like the live stream in Final Fantasy VII. Yes,
much like something, right? It's a real stretch when you want to tie these things to it. They don't really seem to share any real characters beyond the name Dr. Sid. They don't even seem to share a universe with the films. Like, as far as I know, Final Fantasy is mostly kind of like sword and shield fantasy, but not like space marine alien ghosts.
You're right in that it doesn't take place on Earth.
Okay. Now, again, I don't want to get too far into the semantics because I'm not really versed in this particular video game. But it just seems to me on a surface level that they just attach the name Final Fantasy to the project in a vain attempt to entice fans of the video games to see it, which laughably and predictably backfires when those same fans rebel against it for having nothing to do with the series.
That is a point of criticism that's brought up a lot. Would you like to rest on that, or you?
No, I've got a little bit more.
Okay,
I got a rebuttal plan.
I was going to say,
please, if you like, I was letting him. I was letting him rebut.
Okay. So yeah, I agree that it's not like Final Fantasy VII or something like that. It takes place on Earth. And the original script for this was originally named Gaia. It wasn't named Final Fantasy. But this was created by Final Fantasy creator Hironobu Sakaguchi. So if he wants to use the name...
Say that 5 times fast.
I'm sorry?
Say that 5 times fast.
Hironobu Sakaguchi.
He couldn't do it, Your Honor.
That name on something.
I would remind the defense you do not have to keep taking the prosecution's bait.
I can if I keep knocking it out of the park, Your Honor.
Yes, that's what's happening.
Very well. Real quick, Big Ben, could you explain the contemporary Final Fantasy game that would have been out around this time, just so we have a good point of comparison, unless you would have a lot of Final Fantasy games you'd like to dive into?
I believe Final Fantasy X was just about to be released when this came out, but I'm not positive.
Very good. That's a good game.
It is a good game. You're a fan, Your Honor?
I am, I really liked playing Blitzball, though. I would have done a whole game of Blitzball.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. Like, people like harp on the voice acting, which admittedly is kind of annoying, but it is one of the most
I might just be an old-fashioned, big city, countrified lawyer. But it seems to me a whole mess of trouble could have been avoided if they just named the film The Spirits Within and left it at that.
I agree.
Now,
but
since we are on the... Yes, go on.
Let me say this, that the film isn't misadvertised, because this thing was, it had trailers everywhere, and the trailers presented showed that it was on Earth. It showed the alien landscapes that you get. It showed the plot that you were going to get with the Phantom.
I think that the title is a misrepresentation.
I'm sorry?
Please let him finish.
It wasn't trying to pull a fast one on you by making you think it was going to be a continuation. Secondly, if they were going to try and do it, it's at that point it was a slippery slope, because Final Fantasy X-2, which is the first sequel to a Final Fantasy game, hadn't been out yet. So that sort of concept was new. All right, Your Honor.
I would like to disagree that the audience was getting flim-flammed a little bit. We talk so much about how titles don't entirely matter, and And so often I allow a lot of leeway in a title, right? Like, but eventually Jason took Manhattan. It did happen eventually in the film. You had to wait a while, but eventually Jason took Manhattan. The title
And this
paid
film
off.
is in the spirit of a lot of Final Fantasy games. It has those elements that I mentioned. It's fantasy and sci-fi combined.
If it's in those spirits, the spirit is within. It's not without. You can't tell. And so to me, that this title of this film is, one of the biggest false advertising film titles since The Neverending Story.
Or Batman Forever.
Or Batman Forever, which wasn't forever.
If the man wants to build a brand with Final Fantasy and use it to sell his film, I say let him.
I mean, will say, Mr. Maynard, it is a bit, you're on a smidge bit of thin ice because we do have such established precedents in the Reels of Justice about titles, though it is relevant, so I will allow it, but I do think Big Ben has raised some points that the jury can consider. If either one of you have anything more to say about
I
do
title. Have one final small tangent on the title, because we're on the subject of offering potential alternative titles for this work. I'd like to suggest one, and that being Porky's in Space. Now, due to the sheer audacity of this film to go for the smuttiest, cheapest angles whenever possible, our main protagonist, Aki Ross, is relegated to parading around the entire film in a skin-tight bodysuit, which would not help her sciencing at all, despite the fact that other characters are able to wear t-shirts and other loose-fitting clothes.
It's like
Neil,
dude, it's not like skin tight.
It's skin tight. She can barely breathe. She passes out halfway through the movie.
Marty McFly's Nikes.
She passes out halfway through the movie because it's so tight.
No,
she
loses
consciousness.
Objection, Your Honor. This guy's clearly on his tangent.
Neil, the comic relief space marine, voiced by the incomparable Steve Buscemi.
This isn't Inglourious Bastards. It had languages argument, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Maynard, that thin ice has broken.
I'm not finished. Neil, the comic relief space marine, voiced by the incomparable Steve Buscemi, spends most of the movie trying to get into his cohort's pants, despite repeated rejections of his advances. And of course, when he's not doing that, Neil is busying himself disabling elevators to trap poor Aki alone with his commanding officer and her former lover. I ask you, is this the sort of behavior becoming of a space marine in service of the planet Earth? Stranding a woman alone against her will in an uncomfortable situation with a man bent on pressuring her into doing the no pants dance? I think not. That type of behavior was wrong in 2001, it's wrong in 2020, and by God, you can damn well bet your ass it'll still be wrong in 2065.
Order, please,
and
order.
Prosecution rests.
Okay, I'm not going to justify that with a response, although I do think it's cool that they made Steve Buscemi like a sci-fi action hero.
Sci-fi pervert? You think it's cool they made him a sci-fi pervert?
Order, please, order. The prosecution has rested their case. Mr. Maynard, you'll, of course, be able to object to any points that Mr. Big Ben brings up. Mr. Big Ben, please proceed with your argument. You're on thin ice.
I think I did a good job of deflecting most of my prosecutor's arguments. But what he
disagreed.
What he didn't go over that I'd like to say is like the style of this thing is very, very cool. Would you not agree? Like the space helmets are cool. The invisible aliens are cool. Shooting a flare gun that illuminates these invisible aliens is cool.
I watched this thing on Pluto TV, so I don't think I got the full high experience you
new
had.
Evidence come to light, Your Honor. No one can watch this on Pluto TV and get the sheer brilliance.
To be honest with you, how else would you watch it? I'm not going to pay money for this turkey. I'm not paying money for this turkey, and neither should anyone else.
All right, order, Mr. Maynard. Please
the film the way it's meant to be seen. We need to throw this whole case out, Your Honor. This prosecutor has obviously just lost all of his credibility.
I will have you know that Mr. Maynard had no credibility to lose, so he's fine.
Oh, yeah, so stipulated.
Please continue, Mr. Haslar.
I love that everything in this film is intentional from the view. You don't, like when you're shooting a live action film, there's things that may be accidentally cool. Things that are in animation, and especially this, which is photorealistic, is intentional. And it's a work of art, Your Honor. And yeah, the fandoms are cool. I think the story is cool. You can go around and talk about some of the like the philosophy points it touches
Would you
on.
tell me which parts of the story are cool?
The aliens that are invisible that you can light up with flare guns, and that their spirit energy that can be canceled out with science, like the scientific frequency that matches it. I think that's very interesting. It's not something you see in your typical summer blockbuster, and that's where this film is great because it does something different. It dares to dream.
I call that dream a nightmare, Your Honor.
So noted for the record. Please continue, Mr. Haslar, unless you're ready to wrap up your case.
I'd just like to say that the way that it bounces between sci-fi and fantasy is so great. We got alien science fiction turned into ghosts, fantasy that operate on a wavelength, sci-fi that can be counteracted with opposing spirit energy, fantasy. The way that it goes back like that is what Final Fantasy, the video game series, does great, and what this film does great. I rest my case.
Very good. All right, Mr. Haslar, you are also rewarded 200 XP and a +1 longsword. Mr. Maynard, you may present your closing statement.
Peoples and geists of the jury, I think we've established today that Final Fantasy The Spirits Within boasts some incredibly cutting-edge visuals of cityscapes and emotionally vacuous simulacrum, specifically for the time in which it was produced. Stipulated. I think we all recognize that. But I must ask you, what makes a good movie? If it's based entirely on arresting visuals, then we must classify many other films with terrific visuals in the same light. Films like 2015's Jupiter Ascending with Mila Kunis, or 2008's Speed Racer with no one in particular. Or how about 2003's The Matrix Revolutions? What about films not directed by the Wachowskis? What about 2010's Tron Legacy? Or 2016's Passengers with Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence? Or what about Frank Miller's The Spirit from 2008? All films heralded as complete trash, despite boasting some very stirring visuals. Ladies and eldritch revenants of the jury, if you let this film walk free today, solely on the basis of its rousing visuals, despite its banal and flavorless plot, despite the complete lack of emoting displayed by its computer-generated characters, you're setting a dangerous precedent that will shroud this great court in darkness for years to come. For one day you may have to walk into that jury room and come face to face with the prospect that 2015's Pixels with Adam Sandler is a good movie. Is that something you're willing to put on your head, Mr. Rodriguez? Are you willing to say that Pixels with Adam Sandler is a good movie, based solely on the fact that it has some impressive visual work? I should hope not, because we members of this court know that a good film is more than just good graphics. But I can't say the same for the accused here today, because it is nothing but good graphics. Good graphics, and that's all. Thank you for your time, and may God bless America.
Thank you, Mr. Maynard. Very rousing. Big Ben, for the defense, you may now begin your closing argument.
Gentle jurors, I did not try to convince you that everything with the Final Fantasy name on it is a masterpiece. Far from it. For example, there's Final Fantasy Adventure, and Final Fantasy Legend, and Final Fantasy Legend 2, and Final Fantasy Legend 3. But as film lovers, perhaps you should heed the words of beloved film critic Roger Ebert. Ebert questions the legitimacy of video games as high art, but even he finds value in Final Fantasy The Spirits Within. To borrow his words, is there a future for this kind of expensive filmmaking? I hope so, because I want to see more films like this, and to see how much further they can push the technology. He gave the film a glowing 3.5-star review that can still be found on his website. And if a man who dislikes video games but loves film can find merit in his heart for this video game film, then I implore you to give this film the much-deserved, not guilty verdict. To quote Aren from Final Fantasy X, now. This is it. Now is the time to choose. Now is the time to shape your stories. Your fate is in your hands. Thank you.
Spoilers, Orin is also a ghost.
Whoa!
Thank you very much for your
Spoilers
time.
for the Spirits Within, Your Honor. Whoa!
We have the warning at the beginning. We're going all in. Thank you very much for your time. Members of the jury, Mr. Caliber, Mr. Rodriguez, Big Papa Schlender, you have all heard the facts concerning this case. It is now up to you to determine if the film is guilty of being a bad movie. The bailiff will escort you to the deliberation room to render your verdict.
So, Kevin, you're our honored guest. Do you wanna start off?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start off. I like how he immediately, the defense immediately started calling it groundbreaking and said that it was similar to the games, and then brought up the great cast, the great voice acting, but then was immediately kind of torn to shreds whenever it talked about movies from the 90s like Toy Story being even better at what it was trying to do with puppets. And of course, this is not a Pixar film. Pixar is obviously far superior, but it was kind of funny that they went from the great cast and the good voice acting to everybody to it being a terrible portrayal on screen, which is kind of what visually is what we were supposed to be concentrating on, not the voice acting itself. And if it's supposed to be the visuals, then it kind of fell short and was proven pretty bad. And and the prosecution talking about just the, he even used the word atrocious acting, which is pretty extreme. But it was at the end of the day, I think it was real bad wooden performances, no real emotion. It was a tough watch. I'm not gonna lie. Visuals and all, I understand it looked cool. And 2001, I remember the first time seeing the trailer for it and could not be more excited. And yeah, it was a bit let down then, and it definitely has not held up. What do you think?
Well, so you saw it when it came out, because I did.
Yeah,
too.
I remember seeing it right whenever it came out, and I remember being fairly impressed with it. And I remember it being funny because people talking about how, wow, this is something. It's going to look so real. We're not going to be able to tell the difference between what is real and fake. And then you see it, and that's almost a laughable statement, of course, these days.
Yeah, it was in the trades that year. It was a big talk about how Sony is using digital actors now, and in just a few years, flesh and blood performers are going to be completely out of business. And then this comes out, and it's like, no, not so much. But
yeah,
the year after this, we get Gollum. So clearly, maybe not going photoreal humans is the right way, but doing motion capture and trying to get something closer to life was definitely something that progressed throughout that entire period.
Hooray for motion capture!
Oh, the mocap. I'm a huge fan of where the mocap has gone nowadays. Of course, whenever you see the new Planet of the Apes or Lord of the Rings or it's I know that even with the biggest movies in the world now, the Marvels, because that some of the problems that they have with them to outsource so much of the digital that you can spot some of the CGI, but it's not all seamless. But to have it completely CGI, it's I honestly didn't even, was there, they said they actually used mocap on this? Because I thought that it was completely animated. I would have never guessed that this was actually mocap. I would have guessed that this was just an animated movie.
They started with some mocap, and then they said not a single frame that was in the finished film was the mocap from the beginning, but they would tweak it by hand, but it at least started as mocap.
Okay, I guess that makes sense because it definitely did not look that was new to me. So I thought that there was no actor under there at all. So I think that with that, I don't know, did the actual actors do any of the mocap? Do you know?
No, I believe it was all just they would come in for like hours at a time and just build the performance from there, but only in audio.
Okay, that makes sense because I mean it's kind of funny because you get so used to hearing actors, so to hear Buscemi like with and look like a stud, was a little jarring, but of course James Woods, I mean he's always good, and Alec Baldwin, it's hard to get behind Baldwin being anybody but Baldwin. So after a while, I just pictured Baldwin wherever he was doing it. It was pretty funny.
With Buscemi, I was really bummed that they didn't make his teeth for that same character. Because, Buscemi's teeth in high definition? Oh, that's so great. If this movie wants me to love it, that's what it needs.
Yeah, right. Is that like having Pamela Anderson play a role, but she's flat-chested or something? contract. It is contract that the teeth should be represented because that's half of who he is.
And
So before we had Neil Armstrong walking on the moon, the Russians shot Laika into orbit. That's the first living creature to go into space, and that's kind of what this movie is. So we're like, are we going to say like that dog's a bad astronaut because it didn't make it to the moon? It's like that wasn't really the mission. Get out of here. So there has to be something to the ambition and the use of the technology that the director, he had done video games before this, that he had that video game mindset. And this really did help set the table for a lot of stuff that we saw in the future. Like you mentioned, Gollum. And then to be fair, the prosecution brought up a lot of movies that it did set the stage for that are really bad, but how much can we hold this movie responsible for those failures? I don't necessarily think that's fair. And I will say too, the action was pretty great. It is hard to get over those motion, that wooden expression, right? I do appreciate that argument, but I do think by having such strong voice talent, it helps ameliorate that a bit, because if you had weak voice talent, then the whole thing is completely unsalvageable. So I think you can view that as like, wow, we have a limitation here, so we need to really shore up our strong points. And yes, it's
interesting that we're kind of discussing movies that were technical achievements but not actually good, because if you look at like 2 years before this, the Star Wars prequels start, and I don't think that anyone can actually make a reasonable assertion that they are good movies, but they did serve as an entry point for practically, and a flashpoint really, for all of these special effects techniques that we now take for granted. And you can't necessarily say that they're bad movies simply because they have that innovation in it, but also the innovation doesn't make them good movies.
Let's use like a really inappropriate analogy here. The first soldiers that landed on the beaches at D-Day were getting shot. They were getting, I know, and that doesn't make them bad soldiers, that was how the operation played out. And I think you see, I think Final Fantasy, The Spirits Within, is kind of like those first guys landing at like Omaha Beach.
It's the boots on the ground. Oh.
And I do like the action in the movie. I do think this is one of those, if we were talking about this movie contemporaneously when it came out, right, like in 2001, I think we would just be gobsmacked by the graphics, right? So this is an important question I think we have to consider in the jury is, do we view movies as we see them now, or do we have to put them into some kind of context? I am not opposed to contextualizing movies, be it that context, how you're watching them or how they're supposed to be watched, or the time they came out. There's a lot of like old movies that have a lot of problems nowadays, but still have a lot of value. And I don't think we do any service by just labeling them bad just because they've aged out a bit. So I'm having trouble getting to bad. I have no problem saying it's not a great movie, it's not a good movie, but like we have to rule that this is a bad movie, and that's a very high bar and it's when something's this ambitious when it really didn't have to be. I mean, the guy who created Final Fantasy, he had to know that this wasn't a lot like the video games. And as the defense pointed out, you had Final Fantasy X at the time, which had a lot of fantasy, but it had a lot of steampunk. There was this move for those games in Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 10. Not so much 9. I can explain that if anyone's interested. But let's just look at 7, 8, and 10, which were very, very popular games. I mean, they're all very popular. A lot of those were moving in a more techno-fantasy direction. The culmination of which, if that were the direction the series were to keep moving into, would one day, I imagine, look a lot like The Spirits Within. I mean, if you go back to Final Fantasy V, that is straight up sword and sorcery, maybe a little steampunky with some of the airships, but like you do start getting into space, you do start getting much more advanced technology as the series moves on. So I don't have a problem with the movie being called a Final Fantasy, but it does seem like it was skipping a bunch of steps. Like if this was to be a video game, this would have been at the time what you would have thought Final Fantasy 15 would be, though there is a Final Fantasy 15 now, which is different. I think this movie and the reaction to it is one of the reasons that we probably moved more back into more of a fantasy direction than the techno fantasy direction that you could argue that the series was moving into, if that makes sense to everyone.
Yes. But
Okay.
the interesting thing is, like, I don't play video games for the most part. Sorry. I understand that's, like, heresy.
It's fine.
I think I'm the one noob out of all of us. But, like, when I saw the movie back in 2001 on opening day, the thing that disappointed me about it had nothing to do with the fact that it was called Final Fantasy, because I didn't know what this... I mean, I knew what it was in terms of I've seen boxes at the store, but I don't know what this franchise really is, other than people tend to have swords. Is that correct? Like, I don't really know.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I can't ever say that actually ever factored into my decision, whether this viewing or the first viewing. So I don't know. I'm going at it strictly as a movie.
So it sounds like you two are coming down on guilty.
I'm still thinking about it.
All right.
Yeah, I'm not a gamer either. I have not, honestly, the last system that I bought and owned is an N64 back in the 90s. So this is all for me. So I'm looking at just as a movie. So to look at it as a film as a whole, I appreciate certain aspects of it. Like I said, the wooden, just the looks on their faces. Of course, this is something that they still can't solve. This is something that, of course, was given crap to the latest Lion King movie that I thought looked incredible, looked super realistic, but again, they said that, there's no expressions on the faces. So this is something that is certainly not new. It's just, maybe more glaringly obvious now. So right. For me, I'm trying to look beyond that. I'm looking at the voice acting. I am looking at the visuals. I was enthralled with the visuals. I got caught up in it. I was enjoying it. But then I was honestly, the dialogue was so bad, and I was so confused while I was watching it. And then I got even more confused listening to the defense try to explain it. I don't know what's happening. I just know, you just automatically know that I'm like, okay, so is James Woods the bad guy, and the Phantoms or the aliens or the spirits, are they the super bad guys? Is everybody bad? And I was confused and lost. And at the end of the day, I don't know the lineage of the video games, so I don't know if it has anything to do with it. I was like, is there supposed to be stuff I'm supposed to know going into it? I don't know. I'm just watching it as a standalone. And at the end of the day, I gotta say bad. I mean, I gotta say guilty.
No, that's fair. The ending of the movie's a mess. It really just kind of ends. Like the whole connecting with the spirits things. It's really not very well explained. I mean, the brass tacks of what the defense said is correct. It's about trying to construct this different spirit wave that will cancel out the phantoms, but it's very strange. Like, why do they need 8 exactly? If Gaia can change the spirits, how come they haven't detected it earlier? I mean, I guess they never scanned the meteor before, is what he says. But wouldn't that be the first place you'd scan? And here's another problem I had too. I'm gonna pull a Maynard on this and introduce new evidence in the jury room, because it just really bugged me. So James Woods says he lost his family in San Francisco, right? So the San Francisco shield went down at some point or something. Did they not get any intel at all? Anything usable? There are no survivors from San Francisco that said, hey, these guys can travel in the spirit energy pipes. Like, we should be shoring that up. I mean, they learned nothing from San Francisco falling, and all those things plagued them in the New York thing. That just bugged me a lot. So I just wanted to get that out there as a point. But yeah, it definitely is a bit of a mess. But man, it's cool looking. There's some neat ideas in there.
There's some like interesting themes in that. Like, it reminded me of a Miyazaki movie at times, because there's like Shinto messages about, the different spirits that everything in the world has, and that's that's a distinctly kind of Japanese cultural idea that it's weird to kind of translate into the American idiom, but I can't necessarily say that it's bad because, I mean, just because American films don't do it, that doesn't mean that it's wrong somehow. But
no, but it doesn't translate well with Space Marines, though. That's the thing. Like the juxtaposition doesn't work very well. It's not very strong.
It's a weird combination.
Now, like if the Space Marines were like see what they should have done is like the people who can fight the spirits because they're all like Aki, right? They're spirit touched but somehow survived.
Right.
That's a lot more Final Fantasy-esque, and that's why you're the hero. It's like you're a normal person, but you somehow survived this event, and now you're going to save the world. But they're just straight up grunts, you know? It felt a lot more like Halo, which would come out later, actually.
And I think this might have been a influential thing for at least Mass Effect. I don't know.
I mean, like it's kind of no. That's actually a good point. Mass Effect feels a lot like this. Like if they call and Halo feels a lot like this, and this came out before both of those. Though Halo would have been in development at the time for sure, you know, and it's just making the Space Marines so Space Marine-ish just really hurts it when you're affixing that Final Fantasy label to it, unless they had to have something that made them special. They needed that kind of secret sauce to really sell it. It would have been something, and it would have been something really easy. They just had to be like Aki with the spirit inside, or somehow survive being touched by a spirit. I don't understand how they didn't understand spirit energy, because every time you see one of your guys die, you see their ghost get pulled out, struggling, practically like silently screaming. It's like, what do they think that is? If not a spirit, I mean, it's like
what? The blue person is leaving them.
Yeah, it's like, oh man, Steve was a blue guy too. Who knew? I mean, no, that's ridiculous. So while there's a lot of problems with the movie, Ryan, I'm gonna put it on you since we have friend of the court Kevin saying guilty. I'm not guilty by just a smidge, just because I love the technology and some of the action set pieces, and I do like some of the spirit stuff, even though I don't think it was as fully realized as it could be. So this one's on you, Mr. Foreman.
So in terms of like the only thing that I can really recommend it as a movie is the visual effects. Simply because I didn't connect with the story, I didn't connect with any of the characters. I honestly had no idea what was going on at any point. But at the same time, it wasn't as... the problem is that I don't remember if this was mind-blowingly visual in 2001 and it's just been 19 years of digital effects dulling the impact, or if it's just wasn't that great even then. I have no idea. And watching it on Pluto didn't help because it looked like shit. And I don't think that's the movie's fault. And I almost want to declare a mistrial. But yeah, I don't know. I'm going to have to say guilty.
That's fine. Because honestly, if you said not guilty, I was going to change my vote to guilty. I just wanted to add some tension.
Well done, sir.
All right. So let's go back and tell that handsome judge what's up.
All right.
Mr. Foreman, have you reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor. In the case of the People versus Final Fantasy The Spirits Within, we find the accused guilty of being a bad movie.
Dun, 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 dun. What?
Oh my goodness.
No! Impossible. No.
I told you this turkey was going to fry,
Mr.
baby.
Haslar, Mr. Maynard, thank you both for your time.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
The sentence for this movie is to be remade and have at least one gun sword in it, for crying out loud. That is all for today. Thank you.
Called a gunblade, Your Honor.
Gun sword, gun blade. I never played Final Fantasy VIII. I just thought it was cool. Get out of here.
This is Wax Waster reporting to you live from outside the Reels of Justice. Mr. Big Ben, would you care to share your thoughts on today's verdict?
Well, what can I say? It was the wrong call, and hopefully I can get this film off on some kind of appeal in the future. I was going to go home and have a stack of celebratory Moogle flapjacks after my win, but, you know, it was going to be a big party. Nobuo Matsu was a maybe on my guest list, but now I don't deserve it. I think I have to hit Del Taco, if you'll excuse me.
Thank you. And here comes Mr. Maynard.
Dig it.
How did you feel about the jury's verdict?
Well, that's Macho Man Maynard. That's right, Wax. And we feel good. We feel good about the win. I think it was the right call from the jury. That's right. You know, I'm just happy that I could fry this turkey up good. And maybe I'll go get some gravy to basket in. Dig it! And we'll get some Slim Jims too. We're gonna snap into a Slim Jim. Oh, yeah!
Thank you very much. That's all we have from the courthouse today. Let's go back to the studio for post-trial analysis.
Oh, man.
All right. I was scared there. Y'all had me worried.
This movie needs a Phoenix Down. We got to bring it back to life better somehow because, like, it has the structure, but it just couldn't deliver, you know. And as I was talking more and more about it,
but it is not as good as I projected in my trial. Obviously, I did defend it.
No, I mean, hey, it was worthy of a defense. It was a great candidate for the show. I'm glad that we got to discuss it here, and I was very happy to have Kevin join us in the jury. What did you think of that experience?
Yeah, appreciate it, boys. Yeah, that's funny what you just said about remaking it, because I just saw a meme about something to the tune of, instead of remaking classics, because they're always disappointments, instead, let's start remaking films that had really cool storylines that just weren't done right and then doing them right, whether it's the technology or having the money or just the passion behind it. I am all for that, and this actually would be a pretty good candidate to remake, redo it right, really do it some justice.
I'm 100% in agreement there.
Yeah. Honestly, I think even if it was just a live action movie, even with the same cast, you know, like just all the voice actors just do the live action, that's probably a better movie just there. Especially Steve Buscemi.
Now that Ming-Na Wen is an action hero, that actually kind of fits.
Yeah, right? I mean, and let's remember, Alec Baldwin wasn't fat in 2001 yet. I mean, he could still have pulled it off.
I had to look up to see how much older he was than Ming-Na, and he was only 5 years older at the time of this. Wow. Well, he's still 5 years older now, isn't he? But still, he's
Maynard.
Yes, Alec Baldwin's still with us. We haven't lost him yet. Regis, on the other hand, R.I.P.
Too soon. But Kevin, you were a guest juror, so you know, how is that experience for you? Is being on the other side of the bench?
No, yeah, it was really cool because I listen to every episode, and I find myself, you know, being a juror in my own home while I'm listening to the pod anyway. And I find myself, you know, arguing both sides of it in my own head and to whoever's around me. My dog is tired of listening to me argue over, you know, what is a better Tarantino flick and things like that. So it was nice to actually be able to sit back, relax a little bit, and just listen to them go at it and actually have be able to share an opinion at the end. It was super cool.
You bought our home game.
Awesome. Yeah, no, we appreciate people that play along with us too. And if you do disagree with any verdicts, people at home, send us tweets, hit us up on Instagram and Facebook, and let us know what you think.
Especially on the Facebook page, we do listen to what you're saying, and we do respond.
Yeah, I mean, I check all of them pretty regularly, and I'm happy that Ryan did not set a precedent that Adam Sandler's Pixels was a good movie.
That's not why I made my decision. Just to let you know.
I knew that had to dig at you, like.
Well, you had to make it personal by like saying specifically my name. It's kind of like, well,
yes, I did.
Okay, well, that's okay. If I say that this is innocent, that goes down. All right.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that was a fun one to be a judge for too, because I do appreciate the video games. I'm not as big a fan as a lot of other people are, you know. But when this movie came out, that was when I had started playing the games. I had played 9 and 10. Around then, you know, so it was a fun one for me for sure.
And it
was
definitely
good having
has
on like the other side too, like on the juror side. Somebody knew the games.
Because after years of it being constantly referred to as one of the biggest flops of all time, which technically financially it is.
Yeah.
Lately, there's been kind of a cult audience resurgence for it. In fact, a former guest of this podcast, Graham Skipper, is a big fan of this movie.
Hey.
Yep.
Thank you, Graham.
Yeah, and and it was a financial flop, right? It had a budget of $137 million, and it only made back 85.
40 of which was the building of the studio,
but there's
which seems like
sale.
a weird kind of thing to do, to actually put your your building costs in your budget. But what am I to say?
I'm not sure if it's on Pluto TV. I don't know how much money you'd end up ultimately making, even in video, home video.
I have to say, I did watch it on Pluto, and I watched it on Blu-ray right after, and the difference is very, very noticeable. The HD is so much better.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I
don't know if
enjoy it, I do want to see it on Blu-ray just to see
still holds
if
up,
it was
man.
as good looking as I think I remember it being.
I'm sure it probably the cityscapes would help, but if I could just see those mouths not match the dialogue better, then I think that's going to hurt it more. Like, oh, I can really tell now.
The mouths are as bad as the eyes.
Yeah, exactly. Those kind of things. But a good case. I was sweating a little bit. I'm glad that Dylan would have rolled if it went the other way, though.
I'm sure that $10.
And for a record, I do think that the dogs that landed on Omaha Beach first were good dogs.
Let it be said.
We could have gone with like the Gemini missions. We could have gone with so many other things. We had to go with fucking World War II.
Absolutely. Kevin, you are our guest this week, so you get to make a suggestion first for a movie that everybody at home should check out.
All right, great. I'm going to go with 2014's Edge of Tomorrow. That was the Tom Hanks.
Great movie.
Sure. It kind of looks like what this movie would have looked like if it was live action and looked good. You kind of take that, add in the Groundhog's Day thing. It was just really cool. I remember it surprised me the first time I watched it, and I recently did a rewatch, and it absolutely held up. It was redubbed Live, Die, Repeat whenever it got put out on video, so it might be a little confusing to try and find. I still have the Blu-ray that I think has both titles on it, but really good, fun movie. Good for everybody, in my opinion.
Awesome. And a plug for you, definitely check out Job Guys, which features Kevin on Amazon Prime.
Yes, thank you for that.
Oh, funny show. I love the Ghostbusters references, and the romance novel bit just cracks me up every time.
Yeah, it's a very bingeable show because the episodes are about 10 minutes long, roughly. Some are 8, some are 12, right? So, I mean, you can crush the whole season in a morning.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, we used everything we had lying around ended up on the screen. So.
I was going to say, when you said you had an N64, is that the N64 in Job Guys?
Yes.
It is.
I love it. You guys didn't appreciate this because I wrote the bit where the guy's playing the video game and he couldn't answer the door, and in the script, it's just, he answers the door and I, meet him. So I was like, no, I want to give him something to do. And I was like, what about if he's playing and he doesn't want to pause his game and the controller? And then both my director and writer, both of them are gamers. They look at me like I have two heads, and they're like, video games don't have, cords on the controllers. And I was like, come on, nerd, like, shut up, like, it's fine. And I initially had him talking on a headset to somebody, like he's in the middle of playing with his buddies. And they were like, any game that has a cord, they're definitely not talking on headsets. I was like, fine, give me the cord, lose the headset. And then that was the compromise. So, and he goes, I go, grab your controller. He goes, I don't have one with a cord. I said, all right, hold on. And I went into storage and I busted out the cardboard box and pulled out the N64 controller. So good eye on that.
Yep. Yeah, I noticed immediately. I was like, I think he's playing Mario Kart, right? And so I definitely noticed it immediately. And so check out Job Guys. It's on Prime. Anything else you want to plug, Kevin? Let me know.
Cool. Yeah. The Eradicator is a Superman-esque type thing. He is what is it? Kryptonian. He is a little bit part Terminator, part Superman. Out on YouTube. It's a fun little short. We just shot it with Blinky Productions. So find it on YouTube. The Eradicator.
Half Superman, half Terminator.
That was great. I actually, I'm a huge Superman fan. I watched that shortly before the show. It is so good. The Eradicator is like the last son of Krypton. The implication is taking place right after Superman's death. Awesome short. You did such a great job in that. I actually told my kids that I have a call with Superman today, and they thought it was the coolest thing in the world. Nice. So yeah, I know.
The Supermaninator.
Yeah, right. It was that. Yeah, great little short. Definitely well worth watching.
Dylan, you were our judge this week, so what do you got for a recommendation?
You're going to love this. I'm returning to form. Reels of Justice, movie about the law, and I was the judge. The movie's called The Judge, also a 2014 feature with Robert Duvall and Robert Downey Jr. And It is like 2.5 hours long, and I hate long movies, but this was pretty good. It's like if John Grisham made a Hallmark movie. So check it out. It's actually not too bad. Like there's some stupid stuff in it, but there's some great acting. You got Vince D'Onofrio's in it as well, and Robert Duvall is always great. So anything you see him in, just watch that. But The Judge, great, fun little movie about the law.
Awesome. Ben, you're this week's loser, so what do you got for us? Loser.
Well, if you liked Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within, and what you liked about
what's wrong with you?
And what you liked about it is it's a Japanese computer animated film that has cyberpunk, and it can be a great drinking game for every time you hear the word Gaia. You should check out Appleseed. It's another great animated film from Japan. It came out like 2 years after The Spirits Within, and it's a lot of fun.
That's like Mecha in that one, right?
Yeah, there's always mix.
No, Appleseed's good. I've seen that one. That is a good one.
All right, pretty cool. Appleseed. So, Ryan, what do you got?
Well, to continue the Japanese animation, I just started getting into the work of Hayao Miyazaki, and I recommend today what I think is his best film from 2004, Howl's Moving Castle.
Such a great film.
You didn't recommend Spirited Away in the Spirits Within episode?
No, sorry. I like Howl's Moving Castle.
Well, the spirits are away.
Yeah, that's controversial saying that's his best because I don't think you've seen Porco Rosso yet.
Right, but it is his favorite, so I will call it his best.
That's fair. I mean, they're all great.
For my recommendation this week, it's not Japanese at all. It's 1957's Invasion of the Saucermen, which is a black and white sci-fi film that actually was released as a double feature with I Was a Teenage Werewolf.
Yes.
And if you looked it up, the alien heads are sort of iconic in their own right. Like they've got these big bulgy heads with lots of veins and eyes. You've seen them before. Google them. You've seen them. The movie itself is, what you'd expect from that kind of 50s sci-fi schlock, you might almost call it. But it really reminded me a lot of The Blob. I'm a big fan of The Blob, in which case, like, the teenagers are the only ones who really understand the plot. The cops just doubt them the whole time. And finally, they have to round up all the teenagers from Makeout Point to finally solve the mystery of the Saucermen. So check out Invasion of the Saucermen from 1957.
Is the mystery that the aliens are also ghosts?
It is not, no. Luckily, I like my aliens corporeal in form. So that was not one of the twists. Exactly. Anyway, so Kevin, thank you for joining us. Hopefully you had fun, and hopefully you'll come back again, and maybe one time we'll make you the judge, give you the gavel.
Hey, that would be sweet.
Anytime.
All right, cool. And with that, we're all out of show for the week. So we hope you'll join us next time as the Reels of Justice keep turning.
Later.
Bye.
Take care.
Please follow us on Twitter at Reels of Justice, on Instagram, Reels of Justice, and Facebook.com/Reels of Justice.